Well, I put out 7,000 pages of top secret material to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I didn't give all of that to the newspapers, actually. I withheld part of that having to do with negotiations because I didn't want them to use that release of the negotiations as an excuse for breaking off negotiations, which really weren't real negotiations by Nixon at that time. They were ultimatums. They were sort of accept our terms or we'll blow you off the map, not real negotiations. But I did withhold those. I gave about 4,000 pages or so to the New York Times, and when they were enjoined for the first time in our history, prevented from publishing a prior restraint, I gave them to the Washington Post. And then when they were enjoined to eventually 17 other newspapers, 2 more were enjoined. The First Amendment is often thought of, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion, by the way, is often thought of as intended in particular to avoid prior restraint. In other words, to keep any publisher from publishing anything. And Julian Assange, to go right to the present, is not a source, as I was, of information. He was a publisher. Indicting him, as he is now indicted, is equivalent to having indicted the New York Times back in 1971, who published, and the 18 other newspapers who published. Now, actually, although it's little known, Nixon did have that in mind. He had a Boston grand jury operating to indict Neil Sheehan, Hedrick Smith, and the New York Times itself. And that was dropped largely. We don't really know entirely why that grand jury was dropped. So that would have provided a precedent for Julian Assange's indictment. As it is, there is no precedent. No other publisher has ever actually been indicted. And that would pretty much finish the First Amendment if he were convicted and that were upheld, for publishing material that the public had a need to know, that was classified, but that clearly did not require protection from any foreign enemy or ally or anybody else, anyone except the American public. It was most classified material is protected from the American voters, from the American public, from the American Congress, not from any foreign enemy. In fact, a great deal of it involves threats, as Nixon was making at that very time to North Vietnam, that are very well known to the recipient of the threat. North Vietnam at that time, their allies, Russia and China, knew of those threats. It was only the American public from whom that was very secret, because they would have objected in 1969 and 70 and 71 to threats and commitments in readiness to enlarging the Vietnam War. North Vietnam at that time, their allies, Russia and China, knew of those threats. It was only the American public from whom that was very secret, because they would have objected in 1969 and 70 and 71 to threats and commitments in readiness to enlarging the Vietnam War. Now, I knew about those threats from people in the administration who knew of them. I didn't, unfortunately, have documents on those. They didn't give them to me. Some of them could have, but they didn't give them to anyone. And I think they could have very well have averted the actual escalation of the war, which did take place under Nixon. I didn't succeed in that because I didn't have the documents. All I had were documents that went up, the Pentagon Papers, so-called, up to 1968, before Nixon actually came into office. And they showed a pattern of lying to the American people and threatening escalations and carrying out those secret escalations from 1945. It started till 1968, 23 years, 4 presidents, Democrat and Republican. I wanted to suggest that a 5th president, Nixon, was doing the same. And without documents, I failed. I didn't succeed in convincing people that this president, whether they voted for him or not, was still lying and was still carrying on the war. Now, the war was going on. That wasn't a secret. How do they explain that it took a man that they elected to end the war, Nixon, and who said he was ending the war falsely? The war went on for 6 years after 69. I don't think they have an explanation for that. It shows a kind of incuriosity by reporters, historians, last month of the 50th anniversary, because I've seen over and over again what the Pentagon Papers supposedly showed, and I disagree with what they supposedly showed. And that's kind of dismaying, actually, to feel that somehow the point never did get across. But I was indicted, and I faced the 115 years possible sentence. Assange is now facing 175 possible years, kind of inflation over the years. But for each of us, that would have been a life sentence.
And what happened to ruin the government's case against you?
Well, the miracle was not only, this was not so much of a miracle, individual elements, Nixon's crimes against me to keep me from telling what he was doing, what he was threatening, which he feared, which he knew that I knew. I told Kissinger, his assistant, what his policy was in privacy in San Clemente. I leaked that into the White House to let them know that I knew what was going on. But did I have documents to prove it? That's what they feared. I didn't, unfortunately. And but they had reason. They were not paranoid in thinking that people who did know and who had left the government over the invasion of Cambodia might have given me documents. And so to keep me from revealing those, they burglarized with the use of CIA, so-called assets, agents of the CIA, to burglarize my former psychoanalyst office, not to smear me, as is almost always said, but to threaten to smear me, to blackmail me into keeping quiet. Putting the word out wouldn't make any difference one way or another. But if it was information in that doctor's office that I didn't want out, which was imaginable, I wouldn't say there was anything there that would have kept me from going on, but it's reasonable of them to think that was the place to look for embarrassing things about my personal life that they could threaten me with revealing if I kept on putting out information as I was. And then they did a psychological profile of me to see how I could be manipulated, a CIA operation, which was against their charter. They'd done many such profiles against foreigners. They were not supposed to do it against Americans, but I was the first they did that against. They attempted to incapacitate me totally, or murder me, or assault me. It's not clear entirely which, but certainly to stop me from talking on May 3rd, 1972, just days before they mined Haiphong and began B-52 bombing of North Vietnam, which I'd been predicting. And they wanted to keep me from showing that had been on the cards, on the table since 1969. Anyway, these threats, these crimes, I think would have been done by pretty much any other president. They're always put down to Nixon's peculiar paranoia and impulsiveness and so forth. Any president who wanted me to shut up, I think, would have taken those actions, illegal as they were. And by the way, since 9/11, they're not all illegal.
So this all has to do with military secrecy, correct? The government trying to keep the American people from knowing. And that's another point that you made very interestingly a few minutes ago, and that I've heard you say before. They classify these documents, which theoretically should be because it would be a threat to our national security if other nations were to know. But what in both cases the military and the U.S. government is afraid of is the American people knowing. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about the military secrecy that was so operative in the 70s, in your case, and how you see it as different or how you see it as the same with what's happening with Julian Assange.
Look, let me give you, go right to what Julian Assange did reveal, having been given and what he's indicted for now, having had it given to him by Chelsea Manning, earlier at that time, Bradley Manning. And Chelsea gave him a video which he labeled Collateral Murder, criticized for calling it that, its provocative name, showing American helicopter gun crew mowing down with machine gun, I guess 50 caliber machine guns, I think, 17 Iraqi civilian clothes, 2 of them being Reuters journalists, and not clear that any of them had anything to do with the Iraqi insurgents. One of them may have been carrying a gun. That was pretty frequent in Baghdad for self-protection at that point. But anyway, 17 civilians being mowed down, and one of them trying to escape, pursuing him, shooting him. It was murder. I say as a former battalion operations officer, training officer, who was taught the laws of war briefly. We didn't spend a lot of time on them, but enough to know that deliberately killing civilians is murder, even in wartime.
The war crime.
So, okay, he showed this then. By the way, a civilian car comes on the scene with 2 children in the front seat. The driver trying to help the wounded men, still wounded, most of them dead, on the ground. And that being fired at then, with the children being injured, at least one of the children being injured. Okay, collateral murder then, which is a war crime. None of the people being tried or prosecuted for that, even though others at the time testified, this is an everyday occurrence. This wasn't anything unusual. It was a revelation to the American public of what the war looked like, what was actually happening over there.